Imagine waking up to a world that looks exactly the same, but something fundamental about you has changed. You open your mouth to speak, and suddenly, your voice is replaced by a language you never learned, as if your entire identity has shifted overnight. The sun rises over your neighborhood, painting everything in familiar golden light. Your world feels unchanged, until you try to say your first words of the day. That's exactly what happened to Matthew D., a graphic designer from Atlanta, who had never even traveled outside the United States. Matthew lived a simple, ordinary life. He spoke only English, and his knowledge of Spanish was limited to a few words picked up from TV or restaurant menus. One evening, he went to bed with a mild headache, thinking nothing of it. But by the time morning arrived, everything he knew about himself had changed. He greeted his wife in the kitchen, expecting to say, "Good morning," but instead the words that came out were in perfect flowing Spanish. "Buenos días, mi amor? ¿Dormiste bien?" Words he'd never studied, yet now spoke as if they'd always been his own. In his mind, Spanish wasn't just a new skill, it was now the only way he could communicate, as if his thoughts themselves had been rewritten. English, the language he'd used his entire life, was suddenly unreachable, like a door in his mind that had been locked without warning. He could barely understand even the simplest English phrases, and when he tried to speak, only Spanish would come out. His wife's shock was immediate and intense, but Matthew himself felt a strange sense of clarity, as if this new language had always belonged to him. He found himself thinking, dreaming, and even remembering in Spanish, as if his entire inner world had been transformed overnight. The man who had never left Georgia now spoke with a flawless Spanish accent, astonishing everyone who heard him. His family was left bewildered, and Matthew himself was forced to confront a new, unfamiliar identity, one that felt both foreign and strangely natural. The language he'd always relied on was gone, replaced overnight by one he'd never consciously learned, as if his brain had been rewritten in his sleep. This wasn't a dream, a prank, or a scene from a movie. It was a real-life mystery that no one could explain. How could a new language, complete with accent and fluency, appear fully formed in his mind overnight? Matthew's story would soon challenge everything his family, and even the experts in science, thought they knew about the human brain and its mysteries. The world he woke up to looked the same, but for Matthew, nothing would ever be the same again. The D household was thrown into confusion, as if a sudden storm had swept through their lives overnight, leaving everything familiar feeling foreign. Sarah, his wife, thought it was a joke, until she saw the fear in Matthew's eyes, a fear that mirrored her own growing panic. Their children watched, confused and anxious, as their father spoke only Spanish, his words suddenly strange and unreachable. Talking broke down, notes in English were met with Spanish replies, each message a reminder of the growing gap between them. Matthew pointed at objects, naming them in Spanish, desperate to connect, his gestures growing more animated as frustration set in. The family's easy talks vanished, replaced by quiet and confusion. Meals became silent, the clatter of cutlery louder than ever before. The man they loved was suddenly a stranger, locked behind a wall of language. Desperation set in, and the sense of loss deepened. Sarah drove Matthew to the ER, unsure how to explain, her heart pounding as she rehearsed the words. "My husband woke up speaking Spanish." Doctors were doubtful, exchanging glances of disbelief, but Matthew's calm acceptance only made the mystery deeper and more unsettling. For him this was normal. For his family it was a bad dream they couldn't wake from, a reality that felt impossible. The home was filled with a new, big distance, every room echoing with questions and uncertainty. The man they knew was present but unreachable, as if a glass wall separated him from the rest of the world. The family held on to hope, but fear and sadness settled in, wrapping around them like a heavy blanket. The search for answers had only just begun. Every online article, every phone call to a specialist, was a lifeline in the dark. The stranger in their home was still Matthew, but everything had changed, and the journey to understanding was only beginning. At the hospital, Matthew became a medical puzzle, a case that left even the most experienced doctors scratching their heads. He arrived with a story that defied logic, and soon his situation would challenge everything the medical team thought they knew about the brain. Tests for stroke, tumor, or injury all came back clear. Every scan and blood test showed a healthy brain with no sign of trauma or disease. The usual suspects were ruled out one by one, deepening the mystery. Physically he was fine, except for the loss of English and sudden fluency in Spanish. He could walk, move, and respond, But his words had changed overnight. Brain doctors ran thinking tests. His memory and reasoning were fine. He remembered his family, his past, and could solve puzzles with ease. Only his language had changed. English was gone, replaced by flawless Spanish, as if a switch had been flipped in his mind. Through a translator, doctors found his Spanish was perfect, with a Spanish accent he couldn't explain. He spoke with confidence, using words and phrases he'd never learned. He'd never been to Spain, had no Spanish relatives, and no history of studying languages. His family confirmed he'd never shown interest in learning Spanish before. Doctors thought about rare conditions like foreign accent syndrome, but Matthew's case was special. He'd gained a whole new language, not just an accent or a few words. They called it foreign language syndrome, a thing so rare it's almost like a myth. There were no clear explanations, only theories and speculation. Science had no answers. The brain's language parts remained a mystery, with secrets locked deep inside its folds. How could a language appear fully formed without learning? Was it hidden in his mind all along, or did something new awaken inside him? Matthew's case showed the limits of medical knowledge. Even the best minds could only guess at what had happened. The family left the hospital with more questions than answers, unsure if they would ever understand what had changed in Matthew. The maze of the mind had shown a door no one knew existed, leaving everyone to wonder what other mysteries might be waiting, just out of reach. Matthew returned home, but nothing was the same. Talking was reduced to translation apps and awkward hand signs. His job as a graphic designer stopped. He couldn't work with others or show ideas in English. Loneliness set in. He watched his family talk, unable to join in. Sadness and worry grew as months passed. The family changed. Sarah became his interpreter and helper. The children struggled to connect with the Spanish-speaking man at their table. Love remained, but joy and ease were lost in translation. Matthew missed the simple pleasures, jokes, music, TV, all now out of reach. He was an American, but his world was now Spanish. The family held together, but the gap between them grew wider. Their lives were changed by a language none of them had chosen. The cost of this mystery was measured in lost connection and daily heartbreak. With no medical explanation, the family looked for answers elsewhere. Was it hidden memory? Cryptomnesia? They found no sign of Spanish in Matthew's past. Friends suggested supernatural ideas, a past life or xenoglossy, the sudden ability to speak a language never learned. Others wondered about genetic memory. Could language be in our DNA? Science offered little support for these ideas, but desperation made anything seem possible. Ideas ranged from mind-related to strange and unexplainable. Looking into them was a way to cope, to find meaning in the confusion. The mystery made the family question memory, who they were, and what we know. Any answer, even if it seemed unlikely, felt better than none. The search for meaning became part of their daily life. The lines between science and belief blurred in the face of the unknown. 8 months passed. The family got used to it, but the mystery lasted. Then one afternoon, Matthew felt very dizzy, a small seizure. In less than a minute, everything changed again. He looked at his wife and spoke, "Sarah?" in English. The Spanish was gone, erased as suddenly as it had appeared. Relief and joy filled the family. The man they knew had returned. But the cost was clear. Matthew remembered nothing of his Spanish months. The language, once so natural, was now lost to him. He remembered the time as a fog, a dream he couldn't quite grasp. The experience left a gap in his memory and a scar on his sense of self. The family celebrated, but the mystery deepened. How could a language disappear as quickly as it came? The brain had reset, but the questions remained. Matthew was back, but changed by the journey he couldn't remember. The story was not over, it had only shifted. Matthew's recovery brought relief, but no answers. Doctors were as confused by his return to English as by his loss of it. The brain's language switch remained a mystery. For Matthew, the experience was confusing, a lost chapter in his life. He struggled with the knowledge that who he was could change so suddenly. The case challenged everything we think we know about language and memory. Is language learned, or is it hidden within us, waiting to come out? Matthew's story is a humbling reminder of how complex the brain is. We are only beginning to understand the mind's hidden depths. His journey leaves us with more questions than answers. The mystery of Matthew D. is proof of the vast, unknown area within us all.